this first fly that I'm going to be tying, what I'll do is I'll tie one, and then after I tie the fly, then we'll tie it together. So you should have 3 packets. You won't use everything in a packet. So for this fly, you're going to use a size 16 hook, an orange. There's an orange bead in there, and then there's some orange sparkle braid. So this fly, I start off, I've got 70 denier fly, just UTC in fluorescent orange. I use this sparkle braid in fluorescent fire orange, and I go to the craft store and get a 6mm glass bead in orange. One thing I want to mention, that when you go to buy beads, there's a reason why fly shops have a good selection of beads, and especially with glass beads. Yeah, you can go and buy them pretty cheap at the craft stores, but you've got to go through the beads that they've got, and as you look at them, make sure that your beads are good ones, that they're uniform, or you're just gonna have all kinds of headaches. I'll go to a store, like I got these were 75 cents for this ungodly forever supply. So I'm from, my home is down in Murray, Utah, and I spend the winters in Murray, and in the summertime I go up. I've been going up since I retired 2.5 years ago. I've been going up and staying in my cabin in Island Park. I have a place off the Red Rock Road that is on the south side of Henry's Lake, and I go out there, and it's utopia. It's a wonderful place to spend time. I've gotten to know the guys at the Drift Lodge. They just built a brand new fly shop out on Highway 20, and I was running around with a guy from Utah on the fly, a guy by the name of Kerry Almond, and he's guided for Bud Lilly's fly shop up in West Yellowstone for 10 years, and he came to me asking me to tie some of these flies for him, because the guides were all getting these flies, but the shop wouldn't carry them, and they were really simple flies. So I started tying for him, and then I started tying for one of the other guides up there. And this first fly that I'm going to tie, this OJ, I stole from Al Rico. I don't know if you know Al Rico from the Bountiful Club. He's a local guy, but I've had tremendous success with this fly anytime there's a spawn on. I've caught fish on the Madison in the winter time on it. This time of year on the Green River, it just knocks them dead. So to start out with, if you get an opportunity and you're going to go up to fish anything in Island Park or anything outside of the park, Island Park, Yellowstone Park, the Madison Arm from Hebgen Lake, keep in mind that this lodge that sponsors me, the Drift Lodge, they're closer to any of that fishing than you are even in West Yellowstone, with the exception of going inside the park. But we're about 19 miles. The shop's probably 18 miles from the west entrance into Yellowstone Park, and then we fish all the way up into the Fire Hole by Old Faithful. That's about 20 miles inside the park. You've got 16 miles to go into Madison Junction, and then above Madison Junction up to the Fire Hole is probably another maybe 10 miles. So you've got a lot of fishing and a lot of opportunities up there. And if you're up in that area, stop in the shop. They're very willing to help you out with local knowledge of what's going on. Mike has, this year, he'll be guiding inside of Yellowstone Park, so he's a concessionaire in the park. He's also got rights to guide out on Henry's Lake, if you're interested in that, and he's got guide opportunities on, God, what's the name of it? It slipped my mind. A private Sheridan, on Sheridan Lake, and that his guide prices, I think they were $350 for a $350 or $375 for a guided trip for a full day, and you can go on Sheridan Lake, and Sheridan Lake's $100 a rod. So to have a guide and a boat and supply your lunch and everything's a pretty good deal. So this first fly is the OJ. It's really simple. I start out by putting the orange bead on a Dirichi 1130 hook. It's just a scud hook. I tie these in 16s for up in Island Park and up north, and size 18 down here on the local waters. So start out with the bead. Just start your tie and thread and go back to the point of the hook. Take some of this braid, one loose wrap, let you get it where you want it. Wrap it back to the bend of the hook. I thought your camera was blurry. I just need my glasses, I guess. Just to the edge of the hook, back up to the eye. Now, if you're using a rotary vise, you can just leave your thread up tight next to that bead, and you can use your rotary and wrap the fly forward. So I make 2 wraps in front, a couple wraps behind, trim it off. That should be a pretty easy warm-up for you. Then a whip finish. Now, one thing you want to do, you notice how I've got my tie and thread and tension on my thread. The last thing I do after I tie a whip finish knot, and you always want to do that, is take your thumb and push it forward to lock that thread in. That'll keep it so you don't have to use head cement. And that's the OJ. That's it. This one I've got a standard nymph hook, size 14. Gotta put a bead on. On the second page of the handout that I brought, or that I gave Bill and he posted, there's a chart that might be good for you. It's got sizes as to what size bead corresponds with what size hook as a reference. It also has thread sizes on there, and it has a listing for lead. A lot of my flies that I tie for in the park, and the thing that makes it different by having a fly tied by yourself versus going to a shop and buying them, is you're able to lead your flies. I always use tungsten beads on all my flies. I feel like it's worth the extra money, and I lead everything. Especially, I tie these soft hackles. I tie them with lead and a tungsten bead, and without lead. and this is what we fish in the park.
Doesn't the park regulation?
The park regulation says that you cannot have lead on your, but it's just visible, so as long as you've got it covered, they don't know.
So what's a good alternative to lead wire?
I don't know, I buy the non-lead stuff. To me, it's the same.
Yeah,
I don't have a preference, I just, whatever I get. I do feel like it's important that you size it the right size or your flies get too thick. And a lot of the things up inside Yellowstone Park and in the park, a lot of the flies that they have that you're using and that, they want a thin profile. They're not built up. As an example, my zebra midges, I tie and I put small wire on them, you know, or extra small if they're a size 18, just enough that they has a little flash. But I mean, literally just one layer of thread, or you're not catching fish. So the real thin profile seems to, for some reason, works a lot better up there. Okay, so you go out and you take this partridge feather. You should have 2 of them in your little package. Keep the better one. If there's one that's kind of ratty looking, trim the crap fur off of it and then just get it out. The other thing that you want to do is, if you notice on this feather how I have those fibers pulled straight out, if when you pull a little clump of feathers off the stem, if you pull them straight out, straight off, all the tips will be aligned and you won't have to try to align the tips. So about the gap width of the hook is how much tail I want on here. So then we need some tinsel. And this tinsel is got 2 colors on it. One side is gold, the other side is silver. You want to tie this in the back on the side of the hook facing you. You want to tie it in with the silver side facing you. So I put a light wrap on it first and then tighten it and go back. That way I can pull the tinsel back. Once you've got the tinsel locked in, we're going to use some hare's ear dubbing. We're going to do a direct dub onto the thread. Keep it thin. And just cover that thread up. Wrap right up behind the bead and stop. Then you're going to take and palmer this as you go away from you. You'll notice that this tinsel shows the gold side. And you wrap that right up to the bead. Put 2 wraps behind, and then pull it back in a couple wraps before you cut that off. Okay. And then the final step is to put wrap the soft hackle so I can get something that's Again, I take the feather, pull all this fur out. Pull it back from the stem. Then I take this part, pinch it right at the front, and pull as many of those fibers back as I can. As I do it, I try to make sure that the feathers are equal on each side of the See how I've done that? I lay that clump right over the bead, and right where that V is where I put a couple wraps of the thread around that point. If you've got a big piece of feather hanging out, you can cut it off. But as you can see, I didn't get. I grabbed that in, and as I wrapped it, it just fell back. So I don't need to trim it. So then, usually 2 or 3 wraps. That's plenty. Then goes straight up, tie that off, down. Again, I pull it down, pull it into that bead, 2 wraps, pull it back, suck that material back in, and then I can break off the stem. Then I pull my fingers and pull the feathers back. And the reason why we use this orange thread is we just then put a little hot spot right behind the bead. And that forces those feathers back. Quick whip finish. Again, lock the thread in tight. It's a good place for it to break. And that's a hare's ear hot hackle. My buddy that goes to that's up there at the he's now going to be the head guide at the Drift Lodge. I tie 500. The first group of flies was 500 flies of this pattern. This is called a ram. This is a size 16, 2x long hook. This is a barbless hook that's in here. It's just a nymph hook, but it's the hook shank's 2x long. 90% of the fish that the clients catch are on this fly inside the park. So it's a simple tie. It's important that you get the right colors, and the materials are important. I've tried in a dark brown. I prefer a more olive, a darker olive color than this that we have out today. But you can use Antron, you can use crinkled Zelon. This is I bought some of that Bonnie's craft cord, and that's what this is. And then I split it out. I buy the 4mm, and then I use this for my parapos, everything. The only problem with it is it's color fast, and I haven't been able to get it to dye. As soon as I figure out how to get this stuff to take a dye, I'll be a millionaire. So,
Magic marker on it?
yeah, that's too time consuming. Well, you're tying 500 of these. You're not gonna get out a magic marker. Okay, so you start out, One of the things that we had a tire come to the Bountiful Fly Club last week, and it was driving me nuts because every time he did a reference on the hook, he'd say, "Oh, do it. Start your thread about a 1/16 of an inch back, or an 1/8 of an inch, or that." You know what? We're tying flies, and everything that you do in tying a fly is off a reference point. So you've got several points of reference on the hook. One is the eye of the hook, and where it bends to the point of the hook is what they call the eye. Okay, so that's a reference point. So when I say you start your thread about 2 widths of the eye back, you're going to start your thread here and start your wrapping to wrap back. Now, the reason why you do that, and if you get in the habit when you tie, you get in the habit of always starting your thread at your reference point, you won't crowd the eye of the hook with your flies. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you start out 2 eyelets or eye widths back, start your thread, and then I take this color, the green, snip it off so I have a good square point, and then I loosely wrap it and pull it back to where I can get in there and start wrapping. And I wrap the thread back to the bend of the hook. Then I go back up and I stop at my reference point. All right, so we've got the thread on. Now, wet your fingers a little bit and pull those fibers back, and as you pull them back, twist them. You're gonna make a really tight braid on this. Then start your rotary and just rotary it up. Oh, come on. Back up to your reference point, straight up, stop. 2 wraps in back, 1 in, couple in front, snip that off. That's how you segment the body. Then to get the shuck, you just take some of that white, wrap it around your thread, pinch it in your fingers, and pull it up tight. Now, as you pull that, let it rotate on you a little bit, and then put a head on the fly. And as you tie that, go back up on that a little bit. Come back in with your whip finisher. Tie this off. I was fishing Barnes Pools one day, and my wife decided that since she retired and doesn't have a lot of money to go spend at the clothing stores, she's decided that she would take up fly fishing so that she could buy all new gear and everything. So we were in the park in Barnes Pools, and I was fishing with my wife and Jamie, and I was helping my wife, and my wife just started catching fish like crazy. And Jamie's downstream 40 yards, and if you've ever fished in Barnes Pools at the park, it's always packed, and there's always like 5 guys standing there watching you fish. It's just like, it's like the Middle Provo, but we're in there. But it's a good place for people to catch fish. You catch a lot of fish in there. So my wife's catching fish, and Jamie starts yelling, "What are you using? What are you using?" I said, I'm using presentation. I'm not telling you what fly I'm using. I says, if you'd like a fly, you walk up here and I'll give you a fly. So she walks up, hand her one of these rams. She goes back down and ties it on, starts catching fish almost every cast. And she was so embarrassing because every time she'd hook a fish, she'd scream, "Fish on! Fish on!" And I'd be like, "Jamie, shut up." I says, "Nobody wants to hear you catching fish." I says, "They're all watching you. You don't need to be advertised." I thought we were going to get run off the river.
Anybody like that, do we, Dave?
I do. I thought we were going to get run off the river. And that's the ram. All right. I swore that to the person that I got this pattern from that I would never show it. So being a true fisherman, of course I lied.
Your mouth is moving.
This is a fly that they use on the Middle Provo. It was their #1 guide fly that they used, and it's called the Ghost Midge. We start out on a size 16. Now, again, I brought these hooks in size 16 so that you could get the patterns, but for the Middle Provo, you've got to go down to an 18 or a 20 on this, okay? But it's a good pattern, catches lots of fish. So again, I started out with just a glass bead, and you know what, to be honest with you, looks like the glass on this bead is a little bit big for the eye of this hook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put a little bit of thread right on the front and then whip finish it before I start out here. And I'm going to cut that off, take some of my Sally Hansen's, and just soak that in, and then I'm going to push the bead on. Basically, I'm gluing the bead in place so that it doesn't crowd the eye of the hook. So you start out with getting your bead on, and then you take your red thread behind the bead and just wrap back. If you guys notice, I always keep my thread at a 45-degree angle when I wrap back, and that allows me to, with this tag end, it allows me to keep my wraps even. So I use the tag end of the thread as I wrap back, and that keeps your thread with even wraps. Okay, so we pull that off. The next piece, you've got a piece of this black tinsel, this flashback tinsel in there. First you put your wire in. Got some red wire. Wrap your wire in and go back. I kind of had to laugh. This gal that I've been trying to show how to tie flies, she had her wire wrapped all around, and she goes, "How do you keep your wire from unwrapping?" And I says, "Well, there's two ways." I says, "If you've got an old fly tying kit with an old bodkin, I says, it's good to put your wire in that way. But I says, the other thing you do is," I says, "you put it back in underneath the cap, and it holds it in place." She had wire going everywhere. Then we tie in this black tinsel. And try to keep this right on the top of the hook. Oh. That's okay, I'll get it. All right. Pull that up. That didn't stay. And trim that off.
Well, this is still attached.
Yeah. Here. Okay. This is a light tan ostrich herl. And just take a piece of that. We're going to tie that in by the end where the stem is. So strip that off a little bit, and you can just tie that in. And then wrap your thread forward. Okay, we take the ostrich herl. We do nice close wraps all the way up the body of the fly.
Is that ostrich as delicate as peacock pearl?
No, I'm pulling on this pretty good. Once you get back up to the top, again, 2 wraps in front, a couple wraps behind. Go in with your scissors and snip that off. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this black flashback and we're going to keep it right on the top of the hook.
Yeah, theoretically.
And tie that on. 1 loose wrap, pull in tension on it, snug it in.
That's how I do my sow bugs.
2 in the back, 2 in the front. Trim that off. Then the red wire. 1 wrap in the back, and then segment it, palmer it right up, work it through the fly. Right up behind the bead. 2 wraps. And that's it. And a whip finish.
It's a cell bug.
He did
It's a
say.
ghost fly. Yeah.
I don't know. That's what they use.
Rotate your vice, will you?
Rotate your vise a little towards us, the other way. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I tie sow bugs,
Mm-hmm.
except without the low wire.
Okay? Seriously, I have no idea why the hell this fly works on Henry's Lake and why, but I probably tie a dozen a week, and the shop sells out of them. They're begging for them every time I go in. I tie them in a size 10, and this is a size 8 streamer hook. So I just take the black thread, I go about midway down the shank of the hook and start out with my wraps going to the back of the hook. Once you get to the point of the hook, give yourself some thread and pull it down because we're going to make a dubbing loop. So you want this dubbing loop, you want to make sure you're long enough because we're going to, once we spin it up, we're going to make this dubbing loop and it's actually going to become the tail. So you make your loop, go around, close off the dubbing loop and come back forward. Then you take some of this mohair and just sparsely stick it in this dubbing loop that we created. And then we're going to spin it up. All right, now that we've got that, just sparsely brush it a little bit, clean it up, spin it in good and tight. Now we're going to come back, just tie that off. Let that come back up and spin back on the hook. And wrap your thread back. You can either do this now or at the end of the fly, but take this last little bit and spin the fibers out to make a fork in that tail. Let that hang off the hook. Then it's just a matter of taking the dubbing, putting a fair amount of dubbing on the hook, and as you wrap this, you want to wrap and pull back with your finger, and that locks those fibers back onto with the thread. Just wrap it up, and it's just a standard leech pattern. And for the life of me, I can't understand why this works on Henry's Lake. But I tied 3 flies, maybe 4 now, for Henry's Lake, and it's this fly. It's a like a crystal Mighty Mouse and the Mighty Mouse. So once I get that all dubbed up, I always take my thread and go one time just palmering back through the back of the fly a little bit to get that crazy stuff out of the dubbing. Pull it up, whip finish it, and that's it. Once you've got the whip finish in there, take my dubbing brush, just brush it out. And that's a Crazy Henry.